Chapter 3. The Hollow Years Present. Bloemfontein, 2015. The silence after Kirsten hung up was unbearable. Marnus sat on the edge of his mattress, phone slipping from his hand, chest heaving like he had run miles. The lion inside him stirred uneasily, growling low, as though unsure if this voice from the past was salvation or temptation. His mind was raw, scraped open by memories. He hadn't thought of Carol in years, or of Marjorie, his daughter who should have been his anchor but had become another stone tied around his neck. The curse didn't only bind him to beasts and battles, it bound him to every failure, every wound he had dealt to others, and every lie he had told himself to survive. And the worst of them were not born in Sudan. They were born here, in South Africa, long after he had left Kirsten behind. He closed his eyes and the curse did what it always did. It dragged him backward. Past Bloemfontein 2002. He had been 21 when he met Carol. She wasn't Kirsten. That was the first thing he realized, even as she laughed in a way that felt like sunlight. She wasn't Kirsten, but she was here, present, alive, warm in his arms. And Marnus, drowning in guilt and loneliness, clung to her like a man clutching driftwood in a storm. Carol gave him something Kirsten never could: distraction. With her, he could silence the lion for a while, bury Sudan's screams under music, smoke, and the rustle of sheets. They married quickly, too quickly. By the time their daughter Madri was born, the cracks were already showing. At first, Marnus promised himself he would be the father Madri deserved. He stood by the hospital bed, holding the impossibly small bundle of his daughter, feeling a surge of love so sharp it almost tore him apart. For one brief, trembling moment, he thought maybe he was free. But the curse doesn't sleep. It hunted him even in the glow of fatherhood. Nightmares came back stronger, twisting the child he had killed into Marjorie's face. He would wake screaming, sweat-soaked, staring at his baby girl and seeing death clinging to her. To fight it, he turned to bottles, to needles, to anything that could blur the edges. Carol begged, threatened, pleaded. He nodded, promised, swore he would change, and then sank deeper. Marjorie grew. She learned to walk, to talk, to laugh, but Marnus missed too much of it, lost in hazy rooms with men who called themselves friends but were only fellow prisoners of addiction. The fights with Carol grew brutal. Words became weapons sharper than claws. "You're not a man," she spat once, holding Marjorie against her hip as though shielding her from a wild animal. "You're a monster! If Kirsten saw you now, she'd spit on you." That name cut deeper than any insult. Kirsten. The ghost of his soulmate, haunting a marriage built on desperation. The night Carol left, she didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply packed, buckled Madri into the car seat and drove away. The taillights faded into the dark, leaving Marnus standing in the driveway with a bottle in his hand and the lion roaring in his chest. He let them go. He told himself it was because they were safer without him. But deep down, he knew it was because the curse wanted him broken. And broken men don't fight for love. They surrender. Present, 2015. The memory snapped like a whip. Marnus jolted forward, gasping, his hands clawing at the floor. He hadn't spoken Madri's name aloud in years. "Kirsten," he whispered into the empty room, his voice ragged. "If you only knew, if you only saw what I've done." The phone buzzed again. He scrambled for it, praying it was her. It wasn't. Just another creditor, another debt he couldn't pay. He hurled the device across the room. It hit the wall, plastic cracking. The lion stirred again, restless, impatient. It did not care about money or failed marriages. It cared only about survival, about the beasts it knew would come. But Marnus cared. He cared too much. Carol's face haunted him. Marjorie's laugh haunted him. And beneath them both, always, Kirsten's eyes, the eyes that had seen him once whole before the curse devoured him. He pressed his head into his hands. "God," he whispered, though his faith was fractured beyond recognition. "If you're there, if you still care, why her? Why Kirsten now, after all this?" There was no answer, only the rustle of night wind through the broken window. But in the silence he thought he heard another sound, soft, steady, impossible, the whisper of wings. And a name, carried on the air like a promise. Gabriel. Past rehab, 2006. By the time he stumbled into the white, sterile halls of rehab, he was hollow. Carol was gone. Mudry was gone. His body was weak, poisoned by years of drink and drugs. His eyes were haunted, sunken, his skin stretched too tight. But something inside him, maybe the lion, maybe something else, refused to let him die. The counsellors spoke of healing. The other patients spoke of rock bottoms and second chances. Marnus said little. He kept his head down, his fists clenched. At night, the curse came louder than ever, the child's voice singing lullabies twisted into threats. But he endured. Day by day, he clawed his way back. He sweated out the toxins. He forced himself to eat. He stared at his reflection until he could look himself in the eyes again, even if the eyes staring back were golden at the edges. When he walked out of rehab months later, the lion was still there, but he could breathe again. And in the quiet moments when the cravings threatened to drag him under, one name kept him alive: Kirsten. Present, Bloemfontein, 2015. Marnus lay back on the mattress, staring at the ceiling. The room smelled of dust and old sweat, but he no longer noticed. His body ached with the weight of memory. Carol, Madri, rehab. All the hollow years that stretched between Kirsten's laughter at Fort Sill and her voice on the phone tonight. The past had broken him. But the future, maybe, just maybe, held a chance to heal, if the beasts didn't destroy him first. Chapter 4. Ashes of Love Present. Bloemfontein, 2015. The room was darker now. Night had thickened, pressing against the thin curtains like a heavy, suffocating hand. Marnus hadn't moved since the last memory broke him open. The lion inside was pacing restlessly, but for once he was too tired to care. The past never released him. It dragged him back like chains welded into his soul. He could not sit in silence without hearing voices, without reliving every broken vow. Tonight it was Carol's voice, but there was another waiting behind her. Sharper, colder, yet once it had been sweet. Sarita. The curse never let him forget her. Past, 2007, Paris, South Africa. Rehab had given him a fragile hope. He believed, foolishly perhaps, that he could start again. It was at a church gathering that he met Sarita. She was kind, quiet, with a gentleness that felt like balm on his battered soul. She believed in him when no one else did. She looked at him and did not see the addict, the failure, the cursed man who had killed a child in Sudan. She saw something else, potential, maybe, or a broken thing worth mending. And Marnus wanted so badly to be mended. They married in 2008. He told himself it was love. Maybe part of it was. But deeper than love, it was the need for redemption. If Carol had been a fire that burned too bright, Sarita was water, steady, cooling, forgiving. For a while, it worked. He worked odd jobs, fought to stay clean. Sarita smiled at him the way Kirsten once had, and he let himself believe he had finally escaped the curse's grip. Then came Tabitha. When she was born in 2010, Marnus held her with trembling hands. She was perfect, small, fragile, but in her he saw a future he could still salvage. A second chance at fatherhood. A second chance at being a man. He tried. God knows he tried. He worked long hours, came home exhausted but determined to kiss her tiny forehead. He whispered promises over her crib, that he would never leave her, that he would never become the monster he had been with Carol and Madri. But the curse had patience, and curses never forgive. Past, 2012. It began in whispers. Arguments about money, about his temper, about the nights when he sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, trembling as the lion inside clawed at him, demanding blood. Sarita begged him to pray more, to believe harder. But Marnus had already begged. He had already believed. And all he heard in his prayers was silence. By 2013, the fights were no longer whispers. They were storms. Sarita accused him of being absent, of living in shadows, of looking at Tabitha with haunted eyes that frightened her. "You don't love me," she shouted once, tears streaking her face. "You never did. You only married me because you were scared of being alone." Marnus didn't answer, because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. Tabitha was 3 when the divorce papers came. The day he packed his bags, she clung to his leg, crying, "Papa, don't go." Her little hands were strong for her age, her grip like iron, as if she could tether him to home by sheer will. It broke him in half. He knelt, kissed her cheeks, promised her he would always be her father. But promises are weak against curses. And as he walked out the door, he felt the lion smile, cruel, knowing. Another family shattered, another failure added to the pile. Present. Bloemfontein, 2015. Marnus rose slowly from the mattress. His knees cracked as though echoing the breaking inside his chest. He poured water from a cracked plastic jug into a glass, staring at the reflection trembling in the liquid. His eyes looked too bright, golden at the edges. Tabitha's face appeared in his memory, not as a baby, but as she was now, a child he barely saw, her laughter dimmed by distance. Would she remember him as anything other than a shadow? Would she forgive him when she grew old enough to understand? The lion prowled, restless. It did not care about daughters or divorces. But Marnus cared. The man inside the beast ached with the weight of all the names he had failed. Carol, Madri, Sarita, Tabitha, and now Kirsten had returned. Why her? He whispered in the dark, his voice ragged. Why now? For the first time in years he thought he felt an answer. Not in words, but in the faintest stirring of air, the brush of invisible wings. He shivered, because if the angels were stirring, it meant the beasts would soon follow. End of chapter 4.